Hello everyone, this is the CS Revelation. Welcome to a new video on Java. Today's video is going to be on methods. So what are Java methods? Now, a simple definition says that methods are reusable sections of code that perform actions. In other words, if you have, let's say, a certain set of instructions or statements or lines of code in your program that you keep repeating over and over again, say for example the process of adding up two numbers. So say that it's composed of 3 lines. The first line is to prompt the user to input the first number, prompt the user to input the second number, and calculating the result and then outputting that result. And let's say you do addition, let's say 5 or 6 times in your application. So the easiest solution really is to just copy and paste the code 5 times, but that is not efficient. So to guarantee efficiency, we use methods. In other words, we're going to take that block of code that keeps repeating and give it a name. So you're going to give a name to that block of code. And then every time you want to reuse that block of code, all you need to do is just call the name of that block of code. And that block of code is called a method. Now, an example of a method that is pre-built and it comes with your Java development kit is the system out print line. So the print line here is a method. Its job is to prompt the users for a value. It takes a value from the users as an input, for example, hello world, and once executed is going to display hello world in the console window. So this is a predefined method. And in our video, we're going to learn how we create our own methods and how we can call those methods as well. So other methods, for example, in the math class, we have these methods to say like math.pow, and that's calculating the powers. So 3 to the power of 2. So it takes 2 values and it will return the result of 3 to the power of 2, and that is a 9. Other examples of methods that come with your NetBeans. So you have math.pow, there's sqrt, there's absolute value. ParseInt is a method to parse integers. Parse double, math.pi. So pi is not a method here, but it is a constant. So it is a constant that is predefined. And then you could reuse it over and over again. Every time you need a pi, just call math.pi. And so on. Now, the minimum code to create a method is the following. So you need the return type. So if the method is going to return a value, you need to define the type of that value that's going to be returned. And then you need a name for a method. And in parentheses here, we're going to put the parameters. And in other words, we're going to put the inputs that this method is going to require in order for it to execute its action. Now, the first line of code here, this is called the signature of the method, or the header of the method, in which you're going to define the name, the return type, and the parameters. And the part that goes in between the brackets, the open and closed curly brackets, that's called the body, or the code block that is going to be executed by this method. Okay. Now, here are 4 possible types of schemes for a method. So the first one, a method that has no inputs, it takes no inputs from the users, and it does not produce any output, but it executes a certain process. For example, here is a method called greetings. This method called greetings does not return anything, and that's why the return type is going to be a void. So if the method has no return value, the type of that will be void. And in parentheses, we don't put any parameters. Therefore, we say that it doesn't take any inputs. So inputs go in the parentheses, also called parameters, and the return value type, it goes here before the name of the method. And in this case, because it has no output, is going to be called have a void data return type. Now, the body of this method, which goes between the curly brackets, it's simply going to display something on the console window, which is the word hello. So it's executing this process. So that's not an output. Printing on the console window is not an output. An output means that the method is going to return a value and give it to you or to the rest of the instructions in the program so they could use it for other let's say instructions. So let's take a look at the next example. So the next scheme is that the process or the method takes input, but it does not produce any output. So it has no output. So if it takes input, that means it has some parameters. And if it doesn't have any output, then we go on to say that the return type is a void. And the body of the method is going to execute a certain process. So example, we have the method that is void add. So the name is add. The name of the method is add. And the return type is void because it does not return anything. But the parameters, which are the inputs, are here. So we have int x and int y. And in other words, we're saying that this method takes one integer and one other integer. So it takes two integer values and is going to execute a certain process. In this example, it takes two integers, it adds the two integers and prints them in the console screen. The third scheme here is that it takes no input. That means it has no parameters, but it returns a value. So that means it must have a return type. So for example, int lucky number. So the name of this method is lucky number, and it returns an integer value. So it's going to return something back. And the parentheses are empty here. That means it has no parameters. It has no input. So what this method really does, it only returns 5. So that means when I execute this method, it's going to return the value 5. Now, the fourth scheme here is that it takes an input and returns a value. That means it has some type of an output. So if it takes an input, it has to have parameters. And if it returns a value, it must have a return type. Take a look at this example. This method is called div. That's the name of the method. The return type is double, means it's going to return a double value. And it takes two integer values, int x and int y, two integer values. So these are really just placeholders telling the program that this method is defined that it takes two parameters, one value of type integer and one value of type integer. So two integer values. And it returns the result of the division of x by y. So it divides x by y and returns the result of that division. So that's why, so if x divided by y, it's going to be a double value. And therefore, we're saying that the return type is a double. So it's going to return double. So if it returns something, it has to have that keyword return. If it doesn't have the return keyword here, it means it's not returning anything. See, like, for example, this one has no return. This one has no return. So therefore, the return type is void. And these ones, we have return 5. So that 5 is an integer value. That's why we said it returns an integer. This one returns x divided by y casted to double. We're saying that that's returning a double value. So these are the 4 schemas for methods. Now, we're going to learn how to create our own methods, and then we're going to go back to we're also going to talk about value passing with methods. Okay, so let's move to NetBeans. Okay, so now let's start typing some code and let's create our methods. Now, something that you should know before creating any methods, that your Java application automatically comes with a method that is called main. So main here is a method. It has a name, which is main, and its return type is void. That means it returns no values. It has no return. And it takes an input, which is the string args, which is the arguments needed for the main method to execute. Okay, now One more thing to mention is there are two types of methods, two categories of methods. There are methods that are called class methods. And class methods means that you create those methods in the same class, where the main method is created. So you could create another method within the same class. Now, the other regular methods will be created in a separate class. So you will basically add new Java class and create the methods in there. So I'm going to show you that later. But for now, let's just create static methods. Now, we said it's called class methods, or is also called static methods. And that's why it has the keyword static in it. So for example, we will create, let's say, the method add. So we're going to say public static. Let's say that this method has no return type. So we're going to say void, and the name of the method is add, and it takes two values. Let's say it takes two parameters, two values, so two integer. It's a method that when used is going to add two integer values. Okay, now here's my method. This is the signature of my method. It has a name add, it has a return type void, and it has two parameters, two inputs, two integers. Okay, you can call these anything you like, x, y, a, b, whatever names. Those are just placeholders. Okay, so because this is just the blueprint, this is defining what the method does and how it works, and it's blueprint. But later on when we use it, I'll show you how to pass the information. Now, we said it has no return type, and let's suppose that all it does is just simply outputting on the screen the result of the addition of x plus y. So we're going to say result, and let's say x plus y. Okay, so this is how the method works. It does the addition of x plus y, right? So it adds x plus y, these two values that will be passed to the method through the parameters will be added up and then outputted on the, not outputted, but printed on the console window. So where do we use these methods? So this is how you define a method. So simply here, this is define slash declare, also you could say create. So we are creating, declaring, or defining a method. Okay, now this is how we use a method. So the only place here where you're going to be using the methods are inside the main method. So any method that you want to call or execute must be called within the main method for now. So think of the main method as the kitchen. So you have all these tools, for example, all the other extra methods that you're going to be creating, but where you're going to use them, you're going to use them in the main method. So for example, say that we want to add two numbers. I don't want to simply do x plus y. I'm just going to call the method called add. So this is the name of the method, is add. And this method takes two values. It takes two integer values, x and y. I'm going to give it those ingredients. So I'm going to say 4, 5, and that's it. So I'm basically saying, hey, there is a method called add. It takes two integer values and adds them up and prints them on the console window. Let me use it. Okay, so I'm going to run this and notice that it says result 9 because it added 4 plus 5. I can use this method as many times as I need. So for example, I want to add 4 plus 5, I want to add 8 plus 5, and I add 4 plus 9, and I should be getting 3 prints in my console. There you go. So you got 9, which is the result of 4 plus 5, 13, which is the result of 8 plus 5, and 13 also the result of 4 plus 9. So I didn't need to repeat this line of code every other time I want to add two numbers. So I created that reusable piece of code, which is called a method. And then all I needed to do every time I want to repeat that task, I say, call the name of that method and give it its ingredients and it will do its job. Okay, now let's add a few more methods. So let's say we want to create another method that does subtraction, another method that does multiplication and division. So we want four methods in total, and we're going to be using them in the main method. All right, so let's suppose that the next method, we're going to call it subtraction sub for subtraction, and takes two integer values, and the result is going to be x minus y. And let's say another method, we're going to call it, let's say multiplication, and that's going to do the multiplication of the two integers. So it takes two integers and it does the multiplication and then prints the result of that. And let's say the last method here is going to be division, and here we're going to divide x by y. Now, I must say that when dividing an integer by an integer, we're going to have a lecture on data types in one of the other videos. But let me say that an integer divided by an integer in Java usually gives an integer value as a result. So don't expect Java to behave like in mathematics. So it takes two integer values, but when dividing an integer by an integer, the rule says that the result is of type integer. In other words, if you're dividing, let's say 5 by 6, let's say 5 by 2, the result is not 2.5. It is actually the integer part of that result. So it's only going to keep the integer part, and then it will discard the decimal part. Okay, so the result of 5 divided by 2 is 2. Now, one way to fix this is to cast this into a double. So simply just type double before the multiplication, and that's going to cast the result into a double type, which means it's going to enforce this to keep the decimal part. Okay. Now, that's going to be more on this in future videos. But now, notice that we created a total of four methods. So method add, method sub, method multiplication, and a method division. We saw how we can use the method add in the main method. Now we're going to see how we can use the other ones. Now, let's suppose that we want to use a Java scanner. So we want to prompt the users for values. So we're going to use a scanner. So scanner, let's say scan equals new scanner. And system.in. So if you want to know more about the scanner, the video, there was a lecture posted before this one that basically only talks about scanner. So feel free to go and watch that. Okay, so now we're going to say input. So we're going to output a message saying, let's say, enter first int. So enter first integer, and then we're going to collect that. So we're going to say int, let's say a equals, we're going to use our scanner to import that value. So it's next int, that's what we want. We want an integer value. And we're going to do the same again, another pair of this, so we can ask for the second value. So we're going to say enter second integer, and this is going to be b. So my first is a and my second is b. Okay, now I'm going to start using these methods that I created. So simply I'm going to say add a and b. So I'm going to say a is the first value and b is the second value. So the ingredients or the parameters that add needs are a and b. Two values that the users have entered, two values of type integer. I'm also going to use the sub. So I see the result of the subtraction. So that's going to be a and b. So I want to get the result of the subtraction of a and b. Also, I'm going to do the multiplication. By the way, you don't have to have them in this order. You can have them in different orders. I'm going to do div before multiplication. let's say a comma b, and then I'm going to do the multiplication a comma b. So the users will only be entering two integers, but then those integer values will be passed to these methods and will be executed to generate whatever outcome they generate. So these are the definitions for these four methods, and I'm using them here in the main method. I'm calling these methods in the main method. Okay, so let's run this. Now when we run it, it asks for the first integer, which is the result of this line of code. So we're going to trace this code one line at a time. So the highlighted line here, that's generating this. Enter first integer. Now the cursor that's waiting here, that's the result of this. It's waiting, it's opening a window through the scanner asking for an integer value. So it's asking for an integer value. I'm going to give 5. Press the enter key, it goes to the next line of code, and the next line of code is printing enter second integer. That's what we got here. And the cursor here is blinking because it's waiting for a value that's going to be passed through the scanner, which is an integer value. I'm going to give 3 and press the enter key. When I press the enter key, the next 4 lines will be executed. Okay, so this line is a execution or a call to the method add. So it's going to pass the first value, which is 5, the second value, which is 3, onto the add method, and it's going to generate the result of the addition, which is a plus b, and that's 5 plus 3, which is 8. The next one is going to do the same thing, passing the two same values, 5 and 3, and find the result of the division, and that gave us the result of the subtraction, and that's 5 minus 3, that is 2. And then we did the division, which is 5 divided by 3. And in this case, notice that we got 1.0. In other words, it's saying the result is a double, but the outcome of 5 divided by 3 should not be 1.0. So the casting here did not work. So we could actually do something else. We can make this a double. So the y here, I'm going to cast it to double. So I'm saying I can cast one of these two values. It's either the x or the y, which is going to turn one of these values from integer to a double. And the rule now does not apply because you don't have an integer divided by an integer. You're going to have an integer divided by a double, or you can make x a double so it becomes a double divided by an integer, or you can make both of them doubles. So 1 is enough. And when we run this again, we will get, so 5, 3, so we get 1.66667. That gave us the double type of the result. So it kept all the decimal values here. And this one, which is the result of the multiplication, multiplying a by b, that is 5 multiplied by 3, and that is 15. Okay. So this is just how to use static methods. Now we have been defining static methods, and these static methods are on the same class as the main method, and that's why they are declared as static. So they're called static methods or class methods. But in the next section, we're going to take a look at methods that you declare in a separate class other than the class that contains the main method, and then you make a call to them. Okay. All right, so let's do that. So suppose that you wanted to declare these methods somewhere else, right? Which is usually the better way, which is, aligning all your methods somewhere else and then just call that class and instantiate it and use its members. So you go to the package here, the source package for your project, you right click and add, so click new Java class. The Java class here, you're going to call it anything you like. I'm going to call this my methods, right? No, actually, yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to call it my methods. Okay, my methods. That's where all my methods are. So I'm going to click finish, and you get this code that is generated. This is the class name, my methods. In here, I'm going to cut all these from here. So I'm going to move them. So I'm going to cut them. Notice I don't have those methods here. And I'm going to paste them here. But when you paste them here, you shouldn't actually declare them as static. So they will be just public. Means that any member or any other class in that is within this source package will be able to have access to them. That's why they are declared to be public. Okay, so we've declared these methods here somewhere else in a method that in a class that is called myMethods. Now I go back here to my main class, right? You see here it doesn't see these methods, and it's telling us that it cannot find those symbols because they're not declared here anymore. We moved them somewhere else. So now I'm going to show you how to have access to those methods that they're located in a separate class. Okay, now remember when we talked about Scanner? So we said Scanner is a class, and in order for you to use, let's say, the method nextInt or nextDouble and so on that are located in the Scanner class or defined in the Scanner class, we needed to instantiate it, create an object out of that class, and get access to its members. So now we're going to do the same thing to myMethods class. Okay, so we're going to say myMethods, right? So this is the name of the class, myMethods. And then I'm going to create an object. So I'm going to instantiate that class. I'm going to say myMethods. I'm going to call this methods, right? obj, which is an object, equals new myMethods. Right, so we have created, you must spell it right. So we've created an object for this class. So I instantiated, I created an instance of this class, and this object is going to give me the capability of having access to those methods, okay, the members of that class. Now, when these methods are located somewhere else, or in a separate class, you don't simply just mention the name. You actually need to mention the object name, say the object that we created, which is methods obj, and then you use the dot operator to have access to those members, those methods. See here, like the ones that we have created or defined in that class are listed first and in bold. So by using the dot operator, you'll have access to all those methods that are defined there. So now I'm going to say basically the object name dot the method, right? So I'm going to use the first method, which is add. And it's notice that it says that it takes two, it takes two values, two integer values, and you give it a and b. So instead of just mentioning the name of the method, because it's not located in the same class as this method, so it's located in a separate class, and that's why we needed to instantiate it, create an object, an instance of it, and then use the dot operator to have access to all the members of that class. Okay, so same way we're going to have access to the rest of the methods or members. So if you do div, automatically, tries to help you and generate what values you want to pass into it. I'm going to speed up the process by simply just typing the object name here. Okay, I'm going to eliminate these. All right, so now I will be invoking these methods by simply calling the method with a dot operator and the object name. Okay, so I'm going to run it now. I'm going to run this project and see if I get the same results as before. So it says enter the first integer. I'm going to say 5 and then 3. Notice that I get 8, 2, 1.66, and 15 as the outputs, which is an output for each one of these invocation of these methods. Okay, so this is the second way of declaring methods and gaining access to them or invoking them, and that is by creating a separate class, defining your methods in that class, and going back here, instantiating that class, that contains the methods. And when you want to call those methods or use them, you want to mention the object name that you created here. And then with the dot operator, you'll have access to them. Okay, so earlier we created static methods. Those are methods that belong to the main class, right? Same class as the main method. And we declare them as static. That means you simply directly use them by mentioning their names. Okay. Okay, so in this part, we learned how to define methods in separate classes and gaining access to them. And in the next part, I'm going to show you the different types of these methods, because we talked about methods that return no values, means they have a return type which is void. And we talked about methods that take inputs, does not generate any return value. Now we're going to see all the other examples. Okay, so let's modify these methods. So instead of making them print something, we want to make them return a value. So in this method, we're going to modify it. So you see here, currently it's a return type void. That means the return is nothing. I'm going to make it return the result of the addition. So addition, integer plus integer, it should be a result of type integer. So I'm going to say return x plus y, right? And when you say return, you should say that your method returns a certain value of a specific type. So I'm going to say my method add returns a value of type integer, which is the result of adding x plus y. I'm going to also modify this one of type integer, and I'm going to say return, so return x minus y, right? And the next one is going to be return x. So it's return x multiplied by y. And the last one here, notice, so this one also has to have a return type of integer. But this one here, the result of the division is not an integer value, so we made it a double value. So therefore, the return type is double. It is not an integer. And we're going to say return this. So return the result of this calculation. Okay, so now we go back to the main method. Notice that when we run this, we're not going to get any output or anything. That is because the methods, I'm going to explain in a second. So give 5 and give 3. So you notice like we get nothing. It's built successful, but we have nothing printed. And that's because the methods here are defined to return a value. They are returning a value. They're not executing a certain process of printing or anything like that. Printing, by the way, is not returning. So returning means is handing a value back to you as a user and says, here's the result of x plus y, do something with it. Of course, we didn't do anything with it, and that's why we don't see anything. I could simply do this. I go here and I say system out dot print ln. So I'm going to say print the whatever this method going to return for me. So I'm going to say addition. So addition plus whatever this is going to give, right? So notice that this is going to give the result of the addition, right? It's going to return it to me, and I'm going to print it, okay? We're going to do the same thing for the other ones. So let's speed up the process and simply copy and paste. So this is going to be what? That is going to be subtraction. So subtraction is going to be that, and this one is going to be division, and this one is going to be multiplication. And we close the parentheses here. We forgot to do that, and that errors are gone. Okay, so let's run this now. And notice that when I give it 5 and 3, now I have whatever the methods have returned to me, I'm printing it in concatenation with this text, right? That's because I chose to print it, but I could choose to do something else with it, right? Say, for example, what I want to do, instead of just printing this, I'm going to do this. Watch. So the result of the addition, I'm going to multiply it by, let's say, 20, right? So I'm going to multiply the result of the addition by 20, and I'm going to print that, right? So I'm going to say, let's say addition, I'm going to just say multiplied by 20, right? And if I run this, guess what? It's going to give me addition multiplied by 20 is 160. Okay, so this is the end of this video. I hope it's a quick overview of methods. There will be more assignments related to methods. So I'm going to be creating projects that involve the practice of methods. So stay tuned for the next few videos. All right, peace.